Hello and welcome to another tutorial on dev.java website, and we're looking at getting started with Java programming, and the item we're looking at setting up a JDK for Windows. And as I mentioned before, basically executable programs or binaries like the binary tools in the JDK, they depend on the platform that you're using on your computer, and platform is a combination of the CPU architecture. In this case it's x64 64-bit AMD Intel CPUs, and the Windows and the operating system, in this case Windows, right? So let us download the Windows version. What you get is a zip file of about 200 megabytes that you can open with any zip utility software. This zip file contains the JDK, and the JDK has a home directory. Inside there is a bin. Bin means binary, so there are binary tools or executable applications in that bin folder, which you use to either compile your Java programs using JavaC or execute them using Java, which runs the JVM, or other tools for debugging, etc., JDB, etc. You can unzip the content of this file anywhere on your computer. And at the end of the day, JDK is just a bunch of files. So you download the zip file, unzip it, and now you have to put them somewhere on your computer, which you do. Typically, we put them in a if you want to, every user on the computer can access it. You know that the operating system allow multiple users, right, for the same computer, and each user gets a home directory. So if you want to make the JDK accessible to only one user, you can put the JDK inside their home directory. If you want the JDK to be accessible to everyone, you put it in a shared folder, right? Linux, for example, Linux servers have this shared folder that all users have permissions and credentials to open them. However, in Windows, you can put them in one of the root directories of the operating system, like the C drive where the Windows is installed, inside the program files, right? And then every user has access to that. Once this is done and you unzip this file, you need to create an environment variable JavaHOME. Now, this is not entirely necessary, but it's good to have them. So inside the JDK there is a home directory. So if I open up the JDK, so let's say I open up JDK 15, and as you can see on macOS there is a contents and then home, right? And this is where all the files associated with the JDK are. And as you can see, there are also other files like code signature, and then macOS. This is just a link to the, basically this is the JVM dynamic library that the operating system has to run at runtime, has to load at runtime. But at the end of the day, this home directory is where all your all the JDK pieces are, right? So you want to create an environment variable. An environment variable is a variable that wherever you open the terminal, so you open a terminal in some working directory on your operating system, and from wherever you open it, environment variable is accessible if you define them as global. Now you can also have local environment variables, which you manually define them in your terminal. When you open up the terminal, you manually define them. For example, I can say a equals 3, for example. A is not found, echo a 3, right? And now I just defined a local variable. This is not a global environment, this is a local environment variable. And when you want to get on macOS, if you want to look at the value, you say $a. When you say $a, the terminal treats this as a environment variable, not a string, right? So if I say echo just a, the terminal assumes that this is just a string, and you want to echo it. Echo just puts the value of this string. But when you say $a, it means this is an environment variable, and it could be a local environment variable or a global environment variable. You want to define the JavaHOME as a global environment variable. This means each time you open up a terminal, no matter from which working directory this variable is available to you. And the way we do it, we don't define it manually in the terminal. When we open it, we define this in a file called on macOS or Linux, it's called the bash rc, which is bash resources, and it's a hidden file. So it's a hidden file, so .bash rc, for example. And then Basically, whenever you open up a terminal, the terminal typically loads a file that can have some configurations, right? And also definitions for this environment variable. So on macOS and Linux, I believe if you say env, it prints all the environment variables that you have defined, or the terminal can access them, is aware of them. And so it's recommended to basically define this JavaHOME in your bash rc file, or on Windows maybe there's another file that the terminal sees. So basically on Windows, actually you have to go to the settings, and then I think in the Windows settings, in the system settings, there is an environment variable. And again, environment variables can also work only one user or all the users. It depends on whether you define it as a user defined environment variable or a global system-wide environment variable, right? So again, these are the details that I'm not going to go into, but it's good for you to understand what's going on. So why do we define these? First of all, the terminal has to be able to find the JDK. That's one. The other thing is that some applications, especially for Java build tools like Maven, so build tools like Maven, right? Typically they rely on this JavaHOME, so that they check where is the Java directory, because they need to invoke different tools from the JDK, like JavaDoc, if you want your build tool to basically create JavaDoc for your source files, etc., right? So you want to define an environment variable called JavaHOME that points to the directory where you unzip the JDK, right? And again, this JavaHOME actually it's not like that. As I mentioned, in the JDK, you want to point it to this home directory of the JDK. So basically, if I say if I copy this home folder as a path and paste it here, you have to set it as basically this path. You want to point it to the home environment, to the home folder. So you want to say just Java_home. And another convention that it's always good to follow is that global environment variables, the environment variables that are global, and each time you open a terminal, those variables are accessible to you. They're always all capital letters, and the different parts of the name are separated by underscore. And obviously this is the same convention we use in our Java codes for public static final fields, right? All caps, underscore, separation underscore. Whenever you see a variable like this, which is all caps, it means it's a global environment variable, which means you have to define these in a file that whenever you run a terminal, the terminal loads that file, right? First, you need to open a DOS prompt. Obviously, DOS, these days, I believe Windows has the PowerShell, this kind of stuff, but you can still open a command prompt or terminal in Windows. If you unzip the JDK16 file in the djdk directory, then the command you need to type in this DOS prompt is the following: set JavaHOME. So the way you define a variable is set JavaHOME equals the path, right? And this is just treated as a string. Note that if you have a space, let's say you have a path to some folder, right? Now you cannot have a space. If you have a space, you either has to surround the entire thing with double quote or single quote, which that's my recommended way, or you can escape the spaces with backslash. So a space, you have to treat it as a space escape sequence. Again, this is also something that we do in Java strings for escape sequences like \t, \n, etc. On the terminal, you have to escape the spaces or surround the entire thing with a double quote or a single quote. So if I want to show you, for example, I want to say path to some folder, and as you can see, it echoes the entire thing because this is a string. But if this was an application that takes multiple arguments, this part is one argument and the other one is the second. But if I want to say that, hey, this is the one argument in total, you have to surround it with double quote, which says this is a string and that's just one argument by itself, right? It's not two arguments. The space is part of the name, right? And in Windows, if you want to set the environment variable from the command line, you use set and then in macOS and Linux you use export. And the other thing is that you can append the previous values. For example, I mentioned about the path environment variable, right? That it holds a list of directories, and then there is the concept of path separator, right? Which is the separator between, because path is just a string. So for example, this is one path, and then colon another path to another folder, etc. It's a string that has different paths or different directories separated by, on macOS and on macOS and Linux is colon, on Windows is semicolon, right? Again, I don't recommend doing it from the terminal in Windows. Just go to the system settings on Windows, and then add the environment variable there, save. You can define it as a global environment variable, right? In Windows you use set, and in macOS and Linux, if you want to get the value of the environment variable or access it, you start with $sign and path or $JavaHOME, right? And if I echo it, I have already defined it in my bash rc file, and it's pointing to my JDK 15. And on Windows, you use double, basically percent, and then the name, and then percent. So you surround the name of the variable with percent. And so please note that in this example and all of the other leading, this sign, right arrow is there to show you that you need to type this command or paste it in a prompt. You should not type this character or paste it, as it is not part of the set command. So yeah, I mean, it says that this right arrow is just means you are inside a terminal. You can check that JavaHOME variable has been properly set by typing the following code: echo. Again, echo works on Windows and also macOS Linux. And in order to access a environment variable in Windows, you surround the name with %. This command should print the following, which we did. On macOS, you use a $sign. You then need to update your path. So JavaHOME, again, if you want to, for example, execute Java application, Java or Java C, this JavaHOME doesn't matter. What matters is that, as I mentioned before, there are 3 ways that you can execute an application from anywhere, from a terminal. Either you give it an absolute path to that, so you have to, this Java C is inside the bin directory, so you can say for example, let's say echo JavaHOME, right? And inside the bin Java C, right? And then this is the correct thing, and I can even look at the, so one of the benefits of defining JavaHOME environment variable, now you can access Java C very simple way. You just access the JavaHOME, and then you tell it go into the bin or binary directory of the JDK, and then execute Java C, right? This makes life easier. So if I say Java C -- version, it's going to tell me that it's Java C 15, right? So JavaHOME is, but then if you, so this is the absolute path, because eventually the command line replaces the value of the JavaHOME with the absolute path, which starts with /. Another way is if you can actually change directory cd and go inside that folder, JavaHOME bin, right? And then now I'm inside this bin directory, and then I can say Java C, and as you can see, it works, right? Or you can say /Java C -- version, for example, right? This works, and now basically I'm setting the path to the application using a relative path. Dot means we are exactly in the working directory, this Java C. But the third approach is to have just type the name of the application, and this doesn't work by itself because the terminal has to know the path where this application is. And if you don't specify any relative path or an absolute path, then the terminal goes and searches into your path environment variable, right? Echo path. What this does is that it looks at your all the folders that are separated by your path separator. In macOS is colon, and then it tries to see if it can find an application with this name, Java C, for example, in one of these folders. And as you can see, I already have the bin directory inside my path, so that the terminal has no problem doing it. So I want you to understand the difference between what is JavaHOME, why if we define a JavaHOME, then why do we need to still define path, right? So again, path is is because we want to write just the name of the application like Java or Java C and be able to run it without each time trying to give the absolute path to where it is in my operating system, right? So path, again, the way you do it, path is now with the path is obviously a list, so it's not just one directory. You can append it, right? So on Windows, the path separator is a semicolon. On macOS and Linux is colon. So what you do, you tell it give this variable and then append this value, JavaHOME. We're accessing a environment variable and it's all caps, all capital letters, which means by convention this is a global environment variable, /bin. On macOS and Linux we use /. On Windows we use /. And what this does, this appends this folder at the beginning of the path list, right? Now so again now you don't need to set a absolute path to the all the Java applications inside the JDK like Java C, etc. You need to be very cautious while setting up these two variables, because a single mistake like an added white space of a missing semicolon will result in failure. So you want to make sure you properly separate the path, and also I recommend you surround this with double quote. Especially if for example this any of these folder names has a space inside of it. You want to make sure that there is no space. If there is a space, either you surround the entire thing in a double quote or escape the spaces with /. You need to be very cautious. Okay, do not close this command prompt. So again, what they're showing you here is the fact that you're setting up this environment variable locally. This is not a global way of setting this, which means that as soon as you close your current terminal, which you did this stuff, all these variables are gone. And if you open the terminal again, these variables are not there. Even the path is not there anymore. This part is not there. That's why you want to set them globally. On macOS and Linux, you go and modify either the .bashrc or .bash_profiles, one of these, right? And then this modifies it for every user. And I believe somewhere in one of the root directories there is also a file that can be modified for every user. So bashrc, bash profile, these are per user, but then if you want to have this global variable accessible to every user, then you have to modify another file. You can just Google it to see which file it is, right? Setting up JDK for Linux, which is very similar to macOS. So let us download the Linux version. What you get is an archive file. It's a tarball extension that you need to expand. Tar is a binary application, comes by default with Linux. I don't know if macOS also has it. So I'm going to close this terminal because now we're inside a different directory, and then I'm going to open it right here again in my Java project. So pwd, we are inside our Java project, which tar, we have the tar in the bin directory, tar -- version. Yeah, so macOS also comes with tar, so you can use it to unzip any tarball file. Please note that in this example and all of the others, the leading $sign means this is a terminal, so you shouldn't add this. To show that you need to type this command or paste it in a prompt, you should not type this character or paste it, as it is not part of the tar. So the command is this one, just disregard this $sign. This command expands all the files with the extension .tar.gz that you have in the current directory. You can use the exact name of this file if you just need to expand it. Executing this command may take several seconds or more depending on your system. It creates a new directory in the current directory with the content of the JDK in it. Once this is done, you need to create an environment variable called JavaHOME, and in macOS and Linux we use export, right? And then the name, all caps, means it's supposed to be a global variable, and obviously we are defining it locally in the terminal, so it's not going to be persistent, right? So we define the JavaHOME that points to the directory where you expanded JDK. Again, you point the JavaHOME to the home directory. Okay, then the command you need, the home directory inside the JDK, that's what I mean. Then the command you need to type in the shell prompt is the following. Use the export, the name of the variable equals this. You have to escape the spaces or surround the entire path by double quote. The exact directory depends on the distribution file you have expanded. You can check that JavaHOME variable has been properly set by accessing the variable using a $sign, and then using the echo command or the echo command to actually print the value of this variable to the terminal. This command should print the following. Then you need to update your path. And again, JavaHOME and path, these are two separate things. Each one has its own use cases. Some applications like Maven, they rely normally on JavaHOME. You need to update the path to point it to the bin directory or add the bin directory of the JDK, which is inside the JavaHOME, bin inside the home directory of the JDK when you unzip it, right? Which JavaHOME points to the home directory of your. This can be done with the following. You take the current value of the path. You know that we're accessing the value using the $operator, right? And then the path separator on Windows and on the path separator on macOS and Linux is colon, not semicolon, colon. And we're appending the JavaHOME bin, the bin directory of the JavaHOME, to the beginning of the path, right? Note that path is basically a list of values which are separated by a colon. And whenever you update the path, you want to make sure you add your new value to the beginning of the path. And again, I mentioned this in the previous tutorial that whenever the operating system, when you type, for example, Java, the operating system starts from the beginning of the path, right? Path, the first directory, colon, second directory, etc. So it starts searching from the beginning of the path, the first folder. And if as soon as it finds it, it just assumes that that's the one you're looking for. So you can have multiple folders that have the same name. For example, you can add JDK 16, 15, all of them to the path, but then the first one that is at the beginning, at the front of the path, like the first, for example, if you add JDK 15 and later add JDK 16 to the beginning of the path, when you execute Java command, it looks at the first one, which is JDK 16, right? So you can have multiple folders that have an application called Java in them, but the operating system, the way it resolves it, it doesn't throw error. It doesn't make sense that to throw error, exception, whatever. It just says, okay, I searched from the beginning of the path, the first directory that I find that has this application, I just assume that's what you want to execute it, right? That's a very simple thing. You need to be very cautious. Again, do not close this shell prompt because these are defined locally and you will lose the definitions. You can check if everything is okay by typing the following command, which Java. So on macOS and Linux, which searches the basically the path to see if it can find an application on the path. If it does, it gives you the absolute path, right? Your shell should give you something like this. So basically it should be able to find this application. And macOS is very similar. You unzip and then you point the JavaHOME to the home directory. And again, let me bring this up. When you unzip it and install it, there is a home directory inside your JDK. This is where you define your JavaHOME. You point the JavaHOME to this folder, and then all the executable binaries of the JDK are inside the bin directory. So you append JavaHOME/bin to the path, right? So again, on macOS, you use export, and then you can echo it, access the value using $operator, and then append the bin directory to the path, and then the path separator is colon, right? And again, if you use the which command, it should be able to find it. And that's it. That's how you set up the JavaHOME, and then JavaHOME and update the path, right? Note that again, these instructions are for local definition of these. These are local environment variables. As soon as you open your terminal, you lose them. So you have to define them globally. Again, per user. If you want to define them for each user, you just define them in their bash rc or bash profile. And then each time you open a terminal, it just loads all the contents of the bash rc and bash profile, and then you're good to go. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Please stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.